Well, in our last video, we have seen about creating a database and also how to use the database. Now that we have a database ready, we have to store something in it. Well, the problem is that you cannot store something just in a database. We have to create a table in order to store something. Creation of a table is not as simple as creating a database. Creating a table needs you to give the table name and also various informations about the columns. The table columns can differ from 1 to 2 or even hundreds. Depends on what are all the things that you have to store. Now that we have created a database for students named as StudentsDB, we have to create a table for the students. So I'm going to create a table for storing the students' details. So let's create a table with a reasonable name as its functionality specifies the student's detail. So I'm going to create a table in here. So the query in order to create a table is create table. Now we've used create database in order to create database, but in create table it is not going to stop like in create database. Apart from giving the name of the table, we also have to give the details about each column that we are going to specify in that table. So let's create a table for students details. Now we have the students details. We have to create a column for their ID, the name, which can be a first name, last name, email ID, phone number, and the date they have enrolled onto some course. Of course, a student has to be someone who enrolled to a course. So let's create the columns. So in order to create columns, you have to introduce the brackets into the queries. I've used two brackets. You can see that the open bracket and the closed bracket. Try to make sure that you're not leaving it empty. Okay, so first thing is the ID. So I want this ID to be the primary key. Let's go on to primary key later. First thing that you have to specify is the data type. So I'm going to create a data type of int. Yet again, you can see that I have a bracket in here. So that bracket is going to specify the length of the data type. So if I press 11 in here, the integer is going to have 11 digits. I believe I'm right. If not, please let me know. So space again, and it's going to be the primary key. Primary key in the sense that that is going to be the primary value which is going to be used in order to refer any value that is entered in the table. So there's other different keys that you have to watch out for. The unique key. The unique key makes your value unique. You cannot have more than one instance of that particular value. Let's keep as 10 students in a database table. You cannot have an ID which is same for two values or two students. So which means that it's going to be unique for each and every person that you're going to enter. So I'm going to make it a primary key. But before that, I have to make sure that it's going to be auto incremented. So it's going to be auto underscore increment. Oops. Well, I missed out the E. So auto increment space primary space key. So this is going to give me a ID column, which is going to be an integer with the size of 11, and it's going to be auto incremented, which means that if the first student is going to be entered, it's going to auto increment with 1. So it's going to have the ID 1, and the next student who is going to be inserted into the database table will have number 2 as the ID. So now that we have the ID column ready, let's go for the names. So the first name space. So we're not going to use integer in here because it's not a number. The names are not going to be number. We need it to be alphabetical. So for that, we're going to use varchar. So varchar is something called as a variable character. So it can have both numbers and words. So I'm going to specify 30 characters in this particular name. And then the last name. Once again, it's going to be varchar with 30 characters in them. The next thing is the email. And yet again, I'm going to use varchar. And this one is going to have a little more characters in it because the email ID might be a little longer. So the next thing is going to be the mobile, and don't give integer for mobiles because a mobile number can have dash. For example, that person who's going to enter the mobile number might enter it as the country code dash local area code dash and the phone number of that specific person. So that's going to give you errors while including that number, which is not a number, but it's an alphanumerical number or a number with symbols. So that's going to give you an error if you're using integer. So that's why I use varchar, just in case if someone enters dash, it's not going to give out errors. So yet again, I'm going to have a little bit bigger value for the characters and comma, space. The final value is going to be the date I'm going to use. So enrolled underscore date, comma, sorry, should not be comma, and the data type of the enrolled date is going to be date time. So date time is going to store the date value, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use timestamp. So that's another way of saving the time. Well, that's going to give you a timestamp value, which is going to be a Linux equivalent of the total number of seconds. So if you are a Linux programmer or someone who worked with some other SQL languages, you might already know this. Well, one thing I have missed out is the not null. I don't want the first name to be null when someone enters nothing in it. So I want to make sure it's going to be not null. So yet again, I don't want the last name null again, so it's going to be not null. I want the email also to be mandatory, so it's going to be not null again. Well, mobile number is not going to be mandatory because people might not give it at times. Well, sometimes even me. I won't prefer giving out my number because I don't want a call to come at 11 or 12 o'clock at night and disturb my sleep even later than that. Well, let's finish this query and let's see whether we have some kind of an error or not. Well, I pray that I don't have an error in here because it took a long time for me to type it. Let's enter it. Whoa, successfully created. The table is successfully created now. So now that we have created a table, the next thing that we have to do is insert some values into that particular table. But before going on to that, we have to take a break, obviously. That's going to be in the next video. Creating a database table needs a lot more information than this. This is a simple table to make sure that you grasp it. Let me actually go through the query again for you. It's going to be create table, table name. So that's going to be students details. That is the table name that I have chosen. Well, the next thing is going to be the set of columns that we are going to include in that particular table. The first column is the ID, which is going to be unique, of course. So I have used it as integer with 11 characters or 11 digits. And then I want it to be auto incremented. So which means that every time a new student has been added, the value of ID will be auto incremented by 1, which means that the number will move from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and so on until the 11 characters or 11 digits is met, which means that you can have only the number of students till it goes to find that the ID lies within 11 digits. Now, the next thing is the primary key. Primary key is used to identify a specific value, making it as the reference value, which means that you can use the primary key. Of course, every database table needs to have a primary key, but it's not mandatory, but it's easy to actually use the primary key to identify or point out a particular value or a row of student. Well, a row denotes a student in this particular table, so you can easily point out a student using that particular ID value. When we are modifying data, the primary key is the value that we're going to use in order to find out a student and alter the data or modify the data of that particular student. Well, the next thing is going to be the first name, and we have used the data type varchar with 30 characters. And I've also used a new thing named as not null, which means that the first name cannot be null or empty, which is also the same case for the last name and also for email. Mobile is not null, so you can have nothing in there, which means that you can have empty space for mobile and it's still not going to give you an error. You can see that you have not used not null for ID and enroll date because we are not going to get the value from the user. We're going to auto update those values, which means that that particular value is not going to be obtained from the user. So you know that that cannot be null. Your program will take care of it if you're using a PHP program. Or you can also integrate it directly into the query as well, which means that you don't have to worry about the ID column and also the enroll date column. Well, let's say the insert command in the next video. Well, that's the end of this lecture. Let's say in the next lecture. Thank you for watching.